Now, if the JP schedule is anything to go off of, we should be seeing Ruler Moriarty in the next couple of days as of me dropping this video, so I thought I would go ahead and put out the video on him. That way you might have an extra day or two to decide if you want to summon on his banner, because I have been getting that question on some of my streams, which by the way is linked down in the description down below every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if you want to be a part of that. But I do feel like there's a lot of people that get the wrong idea about Moriarty. A lot of people are going to look at him and say, oh, he's an AoE arts ruler, so I'm going to use this guy as a farming servant. And while I don't think that's a bad use case for him, I don't think he's going to be your de facto go-to farmer, because while of course he can get the job done, you probably have better options on your account, especially even if you've finished Lost Belt 6, you have Habitrot, who is technically a free NP5 if you want to put in the work to get her. Someone like that will probably just be more generally useful than Moriarty, who might struggle on some certain stages and almost have maybe a type of Morgan effect where his damage won't look as good until you're starting to hit some of his power mods, which aren't bad power mods, but you do definitely want to be seeing them if you wanted to do some pretty decent damage. Especially because he is more of a debuff servant, getting a lot of extra damage from his first skill's debuff, and for farming, you know, that's not the most practical thing. It's like why they made the new Scotty give you an offensive buff instead of doing the defense down thing again, because it's better to be able to carry a buff through all three nodes if you want to use them for that, as opposed to only having this really good semblance of damage for one node. So even if you look at some of the damage charts, he might not be as strong as you think, and his NP gain does leave a little bit to be desired. But does that mean he's bad? No, of course not. It just means that he's not the strongest farming unit in the game. That doesn't mean he doesn't have a use case in any other content, especially in stuff like, say, CQs, AQs, or those Bleached Earth challenge quests that we'll probably be getting here in the near future on NA. So strap in, get comfortable. We're going to talk about Ruler Moriarty, why I think he's really good, and whether or not he deserves being called a must-summon unit, which, spoiler alert, I don't really think he's a must-summon unit, but hey, it's a new 5-star, he's hype, I like him, I'm going to be summoning for him, so you know what, my video, I'm putting must-summon in the title. With that being said, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, all that good stuff if you like being informed on the goings-on of both versions of the game, that being the NA and JP side of things. But enough jibber jabber, let's start jumping into his kit, starting off with his hits, of which his hits are really strong. 4 across the board and 5 on that extra attack, which you know I personally love to see, as the extra attack is a composite card that gen stars NP and does big boy damage. The only thing that's a little unfortunate is that even though he does have very solid hits on all of his cards, his star gen and his NP gain are a little bit on the lower side, but thankfully because he is a art servant rocking a triple arts deck with an arts NP, and presumably going to be used with people like Castoria or Tamamu who are also rocking, you know, heavy arts decks, you know, you should be fine in being able to just get raw NP back and being able to fire your NP all over the place. So you shouldn't really struggle too much in that. It would just be more in a looping scenario that the low hits on, say, the NP with it only being 4 and 0.37% NP gain might not be enough. But again, where I think this guy really shines is into the challenge quests or some of these weird nodes, because look at his passive skills. Like, sure, he's getting crit damage, he's getting a nice little extra arts and NP damage, you know, that's pretty good. But look at the panic cut one. Bro is immune to charm, confusion, terror, and skill seal. That is really, really nice. He can still have his NP sealed, and he can still, I think, technically be stunned, because terror is a little bit different than just getting flat out stunned, but it is still nice. You know, it is nice that he is immune to 4 random debuffs that are all individually annoying, and any one of these immunities by themselves, you know, would still be kind of good. The fact that he's immune to all 4 of them, presumably like even skill seal being one that's more common, I think it makes him very nice if you want to bring him into challenge quests or more difficult content. But let's go into some of his skills, because his skills back up this theory that I have that he's a little bit better into some of those challenging quests than he is as a farming unit, even if, again, he can do farming with some relative success. Skill 1 is going to be giving him a double evasion for 3 turns, pierce evasion for 3 turns, and it's going to reduce all enemies' arts resistance by 20% for 3 turns, and a further reduction if they are evil for another 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. Now you might be thinking, ZTL, that's really specific just to get 40% arts down, but what if I told you that he has the ability to do it quite easily, as spoiler alert, his NP slaps all enemies with evil alignment for 3 turns. It does make him a little bit awkward. It's kind of like you want to hold out on the first skill until you fire the NP because, you know, you want to get that double arts down. Again, also does make it a little awkward when doing farming stuff because you're going to pop this before you fire the NP, and the evil alignment thing, you know, obviously is not going to be able to trigger because unless the enemy was already on the evil alignment, they're not going to get it until the NP is fired, and by then, you know, the skill has already been used. But again, I think you're more rewarded by bringing this into Challenge Quest because he has his own survivability, meaning that someone like Castoria or say a Proto Merlin, a Tamamo, they don't really have to babysit him as much because he is able to kind of fend for himself on top of being a ruler, which is just a naturally bulky class. And even though it's not invincibility and pierce invul, sure hit is still nice as dodge is a very common form of survivability that bosses and enemies will use, so it is still very useful for him to have. And then again, if you're going into CQs after already firing the NP at least once, which again, not too hard to do if you've rocking like double Castoria or Proto Merlin, or you have his own third skill, this massive battery, pretty easy to get that off and then fire a subsequent NP, of which it's going to do a lot more damage because they're going to have 40% arts down, and also kind of lets your supports become pseudo DPSs because their arts cards are going to be doing a little bit of damage, which I do think is very funny. Now, do I think it's like the optimal thing to be trying to do? No, but I think it's very hilarious that you could do that because, well, they're going to be exchanging arts buffs. They're going to be lowering everybody's arts resistance, so technically they're going to have a little bit of oomph behind their cards, which, again, I just think is funny. The second skill over here I thought was a little bit awkward when he initially dropped because it's a 30% card buff for all 3 different types for 3 turns and a 30% crit damage buff for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. But with the introduction of Yui into the game, this just got a whole lot better. So if you do want to slide her into some of these team comps, you will be rewarded, because he is one of those servants that technically got better with the release of Yui into the game with the Samurai Remnant collaboration. If you don't know, Yui's own NP gives you different buffs depending on what card buffs you already have on yourself. Now, she does already give people the arts buff, so you're at least guaranteed that, but she doesn't give them the quick or the buster one. So these Omni card buffers are really, really strong in being able to turn on the full power of her NP. And then also just having basically 40% crit damage because he does have 10% on his passive does mean he could do some kind of nasty crits if you can find a way to generate stars, which isn't going to be too much of a problem when Proto Merlin releases for summer. And if you look at his third skill that bombs 20 stars, gives him a 50% battery, and then he gets one of the 2 random skills, either giving him Buster Star weight or Art Star weight. I don't really like that this is built this way because I'd rather him just get the arts crits because that would help him refund his NP a lot more, because obviously when you crit on an arts card, you refund a metric ton more NP than you would normally. And because he has those 4 hits, you can really feel that extra NP you're getting off those crits as well. But even if you get the Buster crits, it's fine. You know, he could just kind of hit him with a wayward Buster card crit. But again, with Lady Avalon coming in the game, you'd rather do the arts crits because she's also giving you that big arts buff. But technically, her own crit damage buff is a generic crit buff, so I guess it's fine. And can you really complain that much when he's an art servant that's providing stars for himself and has a 50% battery? I'm not really going to be one to very much complain about that. I will also say he has kind of an interesting little gimmick with his append skill. He is a ruler that is anti-ruler. Now, obviously, that's going to require you to go through bonding up your Moriarty or pulling extra copies of him. But if you do actually go through and do that, it is kind of interesting that you can use him as not an Avenger, but kind of an Avenger, if you know what I mean. He won't resist enemy rulers because they're neutral towards each other, but he will have that 30% attack buff on them, so he'll hit them a little bit harder, which I think is a little interesting. Just kind of a nice little thing you can use him for, especially because your extra class servants are generally going to fall into niches like that. And so I think that's very, very nice. Like a lot of the other servants that we've been looking at, his NP is very, very strong. It is a 4-hit arts AoE NP, which 4 hits normally would be fine, but again, lower natural NP gain does mean that sometimes he might struggle a little bit when it comes to looping. But obviously, if you're doing like a double Castoria Oberon setup, it's pretty much impossible to fail with how much NP you have going around. I mean, he's got 50%, each Castoria's got 50%, Oberon's got 70%. I mean, there's a reason we can start to get the quick units to do black grail farming. When you're just slinging this much NP around, it's pretty hard to not be able to loop. But then on top of that, he does have a power mod against good alignment enemies. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, he does inflict evil alignment to all enemies for 3 turns as well, while sealing all of their skills and giving himself a 20% NP damage buff that obviously procs first. That does make him play a little bit nicer with Oberon, if you do actually have him. If you don't have him, I wish you good luck on the GSSR. But obviously, Oberon's 3rd skill ups the effectiveness of NP damage buff. So whenever you have an art servant who already play really nice with Black Grail, which even if you don't have it, don't worry, for Anniversary you'll be able to pick it up for free. But he already plays really nice with those people. And so whenever they give themselves more NP damage buffs, it's always really good. Now, good alignment's not like the craziest, I would say, power mod. Like, it's not bad. Let me stress that. But it's not like, you know, Earth or Man, where it has a plethora of servants and has a plethora of free quest enemies. But the good thing is, because Moriarty's a ruler, you can effectively bring him to a lot of these different fights. There's like, what, 1 or 2 gun alignment Avengers? I think it's Summer Chloe and Renmaru X, I think, are the only 2 Avengers that are really going to put a stop to whatever Moriarty's going to be doing, because aside from Avengers, he's, you know, either effective or type neutral against everybody else, which is super, super nice for him. And so, like other servants, you know, these are pretty much all free eats whenever they are neutral against a lot of people or they're berserkers. You know, you can pretty much bring him to any one of these guys and he'll do really well. And there are some enemies in here that you'll see that do pop up in free quests from time to time. So that can also be really nice. The other interesting thing is that you can do some funny setups of pairing him with people that have evil power mods like Benny Enma or Charlemagne, Vlad Extra. If that really tickles your pickle, you could do that. Because since he makes them evil, it's just like turning on other people's power mods, which can be a little bit funny. I don't know if it's the most optimal thing to be doing, but it is rather funny that you could just bring, I don't know, Baiken even, who will be releasing in a couple of weeks here on the NA side of things, and be like, all right, well, we just got this one art servant that turns everybody evil, and so even if they were neutral alignment, you know, you've now turned on these other characters' power mods, which I think is kind of interesting. I think it's also just neat that the original Moriarty turns everybody on your side evil, and the new Moriarty turns the entire enemy party evil, which I think is kind of cool. But all in all, bro is a very solid servant. Yes, you can use him as a farming servant, again, with so much NP flying around with his 50% battery, Castorius, Oberon's even, right? Even if you don't have Oberon, you know, your own waiver that you probably picked up for finishing Fuyuki, you'll be able to get the job done. It just might feel a little rough at times, and sometimes the damage is just not going to be there if you don't have the good power mod and you don't have the first skill up. It might be a little bit rough, especially at NP1, but like most servants that are just released nowadays, he'll be able to get the job done. You know, it might be a little rough at times, but he'll get the job done. But where I think, again, he really excels is going into CQs, because he's got his own survivability. He can get around enemy protection. He debuffs and technically buffs the rest of the party by doing the arts down. Giving himself the Omni card buff means he plays super nice with Yui, who again is more of a challenge quest oriented support. The crits are more notable whenever you go into challenge quests, and then being able to turn the enemies evil definitely shows its value more in those CQs, especially again if you want to pair him with other people that actually have the evil power mod. So I think he's worth rolling for. I think he's very strong, but do be very careful. You know, I am only rolling for Moriarty because I know that all the anniversary quartz that I'm going to get, I'm putting directly into summer. I know that I am not summoning for Archetype Earth, so I can afford to kind of go balls to the wall and just throw everything I get from Trom and Tugunska Sanctuary at that banner, right? And if I get him, you know, great. If I don't, it's not too bad, because I'll still get a ton of Saint Quartz coming in from the anniversary. So unless you're like me and you're planning on skipping Archetype Earth, it might be more worth to skip out on Moriarty, especially if you like the, I think it's the extra 2 lucky bag that he's going to be on, because again, any servant that comes out before the anniversary will find themselves on that GSSR. So do also keep that in mind. Take that advice to heart. But, you know, if you don't really care about Archetype Earth, or maybe if you don't even care about the summer servants, which I find hard to believe, you could just go all out on Moriarty and let him serve you as best as he can. You know, he's a very fun servant to use, I found in my experience. But with all that being said, I'm going to stop yapping, go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice rest of your day, and I'll catch y'all on the flippity floppity.